Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the World Championship Series America round of 16, where me and Rotterdam are getting very goddamn excited because it's Polt versus Bomber. Honestly, I can't even believe how excited I am. It's like stupid o'clock or something here in Europe right now, and here we go. It's Bomber Polt.
These are the type of games and matchups that makes your StarCraft heartbeat a little faster. They're both fantastic, both multiple Premier Tournament champions. Both have godlike macro, both have godlike speed. This should be one hell of a series.
Yeah, it is. Over $400,000 between them and over 11 Premier tournaments between them as well. How does that even... I can't even... You know, that trophy cabinet is just enormous, isn't it? I just can't understand how they've done it. But let's settle down a little bit. Let's talk about the two players themselves. Polt had a fantastic 2013 by any standards. Yes. I mean, only Tasia could probably say he'd had a better year. SOS might argue that the $0 turned quite nicely for him as well. But in terms of tournament wins, Polt's done really well. Likewise, though, Bomber came back from, you know, Bomber's Law really against him all year long, and the previous year and the previous year to that, and suddenly showed us why he's such a special player at WCS Season 2 Global Finals as well. It's hard right now to kind of not so much predict, but even appreciate which one could go. You don't really want either of them to go out, so it's hard right now.
Definitely is. If you think back of Bomber's legendary run back then at Gamescom during the WCS Season 2 Global Finals, the thing that stands out most for me was Bomber makes some units, he arrests, he's done, he walks across the map with an army and he wins. Like, that's just how...
Including SCVs.
Yeah, that's how... A lot of SCVs, because he played quite a few Protoss players that tournament. It was absolutely amazing. The TVT series he played against Tasia back then in the semifinals were also really good. The finals against Jaedong, I don't think Jaedong has been bopped like that in a long time. But one other player that did do the same thing against Jaedong was that other man that we have in this matchup, and that's Polt, who of course won back then the regular Season 2 in America. So.
Yeah. Double defending champion as well. Came through his group pretty easily. 2-0 against Illusion, 2-1 against Neeb. Took off that one famous map of his, and he showed us how good he was yesterday. Likewise, Bomber came through a very difficult group with Arthur in that group as well, who qualified top. He also beat Haz in the group, but he also opened up with yet another victory over Jaedong 2-0. So they've both had tricky round of 32s to come through.
Yeah, definitely. Like, if you look at Polt, you see 2-0 and 2-1. He's like, okay, he dropped the map. You know, that happens to the best of us. But if you keep a close eye on the series, or if you watched it, you will remember that I think Neeb was up 1-0 in the game on Habitation Station. That was Neeb's game. Neeb should have won. Should have won that game. So for Polt, it wasn't as easy as it may have looked. And for Bomber, on the other hand, Bomber was indeed on the ropes because Arthur won that group. So Bomber had to play against Jaedong for his tournament live in the round of 32. Yes, that happened in WCS America.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But he came through. You said it already early today as well. Bomber only had one shot at everything he did. It was such a risky decision for him to leave Codas and be like, hey, I'm going to try my luck in America. Some people might be like, for Bomber, that's okay. But an online qualifier that you play from Korea, that's really risky. Your entire WCS season, that's 3-4 months of the most premier StarCraft action, he put on the line for an online qualifier and then an online run of 32. That's ballsy.
And it's not like he could have gone, oh, well, I didn't qualify, I'll go back to Korea then. Well, yeah, sure, in Season 2. Yeah. And you'll have to qualify.
And you're going to have to start from
the
scratch.
Bottom. Yeah, absolutely. And we all know how hard that is, and Flash does too. So, yeah, difficult for him to come and do that. But he is here. He is in the round of 16. He's on the verge of the round of 8 now. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because it's time for predictions. And I always like this bit when we get two cracking players together like this. It's hard to call, but where are you going? Polt? American?
Bomber 2-1.
Bomber 2-1,
yeah,
okay.
Bomber 2-1.
So Rotterdam is going for the non-American. The last American surviving here in the round of 16 is Polt. Everyone at home is going, hang on a minute, Red Eye's off his nut. He's Korean. No, he is actually American. Check it out. He is Captain America, Polt, who is going head-to-head with Bomber. It's going to be one of those crazy good matchups. I can feel it in my bones, and someone else can feel it in their bones right now. The Terran man himself in the commentary box is Nathanius.
Thank you, Paul. Nothing but we have just so much Terran tonight, and what more could I ask for than a Terran versus Terran in the winners match with two of arguably the best Terran players in the world?
He's so cute. He's loving it, guys. He really is. But indeed, this is going to be good. This is going to be very good. You're excited. I'm very excited as well. It's rare we get to actually cast T. It was Group A and B of the round of 16 in WCS Europe. But other than that, we now have two titans, two champions of WCS going up against one another. Great stuff.
Yeah. And in this map veto process, the only map I say, I'm surprised it wasn't the very first map vetoed. The only map I think that is just, for Terran versus Terran, almost unplayable is Alterzim Stronghold. It is the last map you ever want to play a TVT on in your entire life. And I'm almost feeling like just by thinking that it would get vetoed so fast. They're waiting a little bit on it. If we had a game there, okay, it does get vetoed, that would have just been nightmare-inducing for all involved.
Yeah, I guess it would have been. And now we're remaining one more veto. I want to see from this long macro, Marine Tank versus Marine Tank, and nothing else. Nothing else. Just give me that. Give me 3 games of that, and I will be in heaven.
I honestly would not be surprised if that's what we ended up seeing. First map is going to be Yonsu, a pretty solid map for any tank-based play. I don't expect either of these players to go mech. If one of them does, it would be Bomber. Polt simply just does, just not what he does. So looking at the matchup overall, this should be pretty back and forth. Both of these guys are very solid in this matchup. Paul had mentioned before, of course, that Polt did drop a map to Neeb, almost dropping 2 maps, but those were some very sharp timings that Neeb pulled out. And if Polt has done his homework on Bomber, I don't think he'll expect the same types of strategies to come out from him. But predicting either of these players would almost be acting foolish on our part.
Yeah, this just could go either way. It really could. As you said, Polt did have a little bit of a rough time with Neeb. And to be fair, we haven't really seen a whole lot of these guys TVT as of late, purely because they just don't really get too many chances to play the matchup. So we'll see what both of them are really going to bring here. Yeah. But you're right. The mech, if it was ever going to happen, would be Bomber. Polt's just that guy who loves his mobility too much, loves poking and prodding on 2 fronts. But this is Bomber, our WCS Season 2 2013 champion over all regions. This is that man.
Yeah, truly a scary, scary player. We talk about him being the veteran. He's one of the players competing here that's been around and being successful the longest. But, you know, when you look at the terms of this overall competition, one of the reasons this is the group of death is his opponent also is almost known for the same thing. Polt's been around forever. Maybe not having those top finishes, but, you know, a lot of people forget, you know, picked up a very early GSL victory in the, I guess it was...
Super Tournament.
Yeah, the Super Tournament a few years back. And these 2 guys, I think, represents what makes this the group of death, as some people would call it. And I have to agree with you. I don't think you can pick either player that would win. And then, of course, Polt, who we just saw, you know, just melted everybody's minds in that Terran versus Zerg with an incredibly sharp build. It's honestly really hard to say that I think either of these players could lose.
One of them will lose, Nathaniel.
It's a sad thought.
One of them will lose. This is a guarantee. One Terran is going to win this TVT, and we are going to have one in the round of 8. Yeah. Sick knowledge bombs have been dropped here today.
I agree with you only because Altazim Stronghold did get vetoed. Otherwise,
nobody would win.
Otherwise, we could end up in a game for a very long time. I think the maximum amount before like the client just loses is like 9-hour games. Which, you know what, I wouldn't be surprised with how slow some of these games can get. But if both of these players bring their very macro-oriented, very heavy pressure, then I think that we'll see a lot of, as you mentioned, Marine Tank versus Marine Tank. Yonsu is a great map for tank-based builds, which is what we'll be opening up on as that Ridge the Natural, man. There are some scary mid-game timing attacks that you can bring to your opponent on this map.
Yeah, but also, I mean, likewise, there's the earlier like style of aggression, right? I mean, in the European scene, we see a lot of that 2 siege tank push out, even with Raven incorporation into it, that can always try and catch people off guard. And you see a lot of people like Hero Marine doing that kind of thing, and it's very, very annoying. What do you think of those earlier pressure plays in TVT?
I think on this map, some builds like very fast Hellion drops, very fast Marine drops with Hellion backup are good on this map because you have a huge amount of distance between the main base ramp and, you know, for example, your main command center. If you move your Marines out to watch for a drop, if you move your Marines to watch the ramp, then a drop can hit you very easily. You can unload and everything can just go down very quickly. But also, you can actually hit Marines that are watching the top of that ramp with Hellions from the low ground while you drop on top. There's a lot of interesting positions that you can be put in very early on. And then, of course, you don't see it as much off of one base, but tank-based play, because there's such a long ridge below that ramp, makes it very easy to get sieged up in the early game.
All right, well, guys, countdown has now begun between these 2 Terran Titans as we load up for Yonsu for game number 1 here. One of these guys is going to advance on to the round of 8. Will it be this man, Bomber, or will it be his 2-time WCS champion opponent in CM Storm's Polt? We're about to find out. I am looking forward to this one, and I'm sure you are as well, Nathaniel.
Yeah, this is definitely a matchup for the ages here at the WCS America round of 16. Our first player spawning in the top right position, the red Terran on what would basically be Team Red Bull. It is Bomber. A name as old as StarCraft 2 itself, really.
Yeah.
The number of tournaments he's participated in. He's almost known for bringing those throwback builds, but his opponent in the bottom left been playing just as long this game. The blue Terran player for Cooler Master Storm, it is Polt.
Excited for this one. Excited I am, as now we're going to find out what exactly they're going to do. Not anything really too crazy just happening yet, as we'll probably just have, I'm imagining, some kind of barracks into Reaper opening from at least one of these players. There was no gas firsts, so...
Yeah. This is not a bad map for gas first, but both of these players, and I would say more so Polt, strike me as Reaper expanders, Reaper openers. Bomber will take his gas just a supply later. You can still technically open Reaper. Usually when I see gas at 13 supply, it sometimes comes more commonly at 14 than 13 these days, where you can get out one Marine and then a Reaper and bring an SCV and just do a very early aggressive poke that can sometimes do a lot of damage. But Polt opening up with the barracks into gas, Reaper expand is still just as common in this matchup as it is in any other.
And with that, it's going to be interesting to see who is really going to take command of this game early on. A best of 3 scenario in TVT. Obviously, if you take that first game, then you're going to be in a really, really good spot. But both of these players play so stably, so strongly, that we already mentioned it before. It's so hard to really call who is going to come out on top of this.
Yeah, I think something that's probably more important on this map than almost any other, right? If this was on Frost, I'd say it comes down to positioning and macro and engagements, but on Yansu for Terran versus Terran is much more so about momentum. If you take early damage or if you go for an early push that doesn't work, it's very easy to get sieged on that lip area at the end of your main base where that natural is. You can get sieged under there. Your production gets cut off if you find yourself behind. Then in the mid-game stage, there's the high ground area by the Zelnaga Tower that can siege a third, or you can get sieged under your third if you take the area towards the destructible rocks. So there's a lot of opportunities where if you're behind or if you're caught out of place, you can be very easily punished on this map by siege tank base play. And Polt is now going to be our first player to make that big step into seeing what's going on. His command center's on the way back home, and he'll spot this factory on the way for Bomber, as well as his second gas, which pretty much just screams for a fast Banshee opener.
Yeah, it was like a very technically defensive opener against the initial Reaper into the eventual aggression against Polt, who is opting for the more economical route behind this, with that command center being added on. And there we have now the Starport being added as well, along with the Tech Lab. So Bomber's going to be the one that tries to seize the opportunity in this game, but because that command center is as early as it is, he's going to have to get some guaranteed kills, otherwise he will be behind.
Yeah, the big thing with builds like this is Bomber is, in my opinion, not the player that would build this Starport, this Tech Lab, and then build like a siege tank and a Viking and try to, mess with Polt, because Polt saw that, Polt saw what was under construction. He has an idea of what's coming, and through that, even though he lost the Reaper, he still knows generally what to expect. So okay, it should be a Banshee. He may or may not get Cloak on it. What do I need to have? An Engineering Bay reasonably soon, maybe 2 missile turrets and a Viking. I could even get a few Widow Mines, but Bomber says, instead of trying to do anything crazy like tanks, instead of going for a Banshee that you're probably already going to prepare for anyway, I'll just get a Raven in case you do anything weird. And because of this, he has to invest in an Engineering Bay and potentially missile turrets as well that won't do anything for him.
Yeah, this is a nice little change up here from Bomber. And once that's actually done, he could actually switch that over, the factory, onto that Tech Lab, as he repositioned it slightly, I guess, to be a little bit closer or whatever. But the scan does drop on all of this. And he sees that, well, technically, Caduceus reactors researching guys, but I don't think we should really think too much about that. And Polt should. He's going to be thinking that it's Cloak, but it's not.
It's really funny because these days, if you wanted to fake Cloak because it has the same cost as Caduceus Reactor, you never actually see anyone fake Caduceus Reactor. It's even less fake used than it was in Wings of Liberty. So Bomber's given us the throwback there. But you're right. This allows him to move very quickly into tanks. He has a very defensive setup. And he's saying, I know that if Polt scouts my Banshee, it's not going to do anything. And he's taken a somewhat aggressive position at the start of this game with these Hellions. I still expect him to move into a bio-centered play, but he's going to build a couple siege tanks just in case. The Hellions or Polt just give him that bit of map control, that little bit of flexibility to see what's going on.
One day, man, somebody's going to get Caduceus Reactor, and my mind's going to be blown. I don't think I've ever seen it researched in the game.
I just remember playing the beta for Heart of the Swarm, and it boosted, I think, the healing capabilities of Medivacs by like 50%. Every single Protoss and Zerg player was like, no, it was removed. I think it was unpatched maybe 2 days afterwards.
Oh, Caduceus Reactor. Your time will come, Caduceus Reactor. One day.
Just like Neo Steel Bunkers one day.
The saddest upgrades that never get used. Poor little fellas. Oh well. For now, actually, there's already Vikings being added on here for Polt, and I like this after seeing, you know, an initial tank out there. But just in general, to seize the air control in a matchup like this is very important. Did he see the Raven? Because obviously that does kind of change the swing of air control since it does have that PDD.
Yeah, he certainly knows that it wasn't used for a Viking or a Banshee at the very least. So he knows, okay, he actually caught a glimpse with that Hellion. He at least knew there was a tank who took a little fire from it.
True.
But Bomber will load up a few Marines, and the funniest thing about really high-level Terran versus Terran is that while I'm still certain that both these players will go bio, and Bomber's already showing that with his addition of additional barracks, you find yourself in TVT with very late upgrades because a good player can kill you if you go upgrades too fast with a siege tank push or a Viking Raven tank push. There's so many early opportunities to bring pressure that they would so much rather secure their naturals and not die that both players are willing to concede much later upgrades. And now Polt starts his additional barracks. So this will end up being, as you had hoped for, that Marine tank versus Marine tank game.
Yeah, exciting. I'm loving it. And it becomes very much about the positioning from that point on. And if you can actually overwhelm your opponent, there are little neat tricks that you can try and pull, but also Viking count's extremely important during all of this as well. As both players just currently adding on Medivacs to see if they can try and poke and prod and find little bits of room. And these Vikings, they're on patrol to find those Medivacs just in case.
Yeah, the biggest difference right now in terms of the overall game plan, Bomber has taken a very passive stance. He destroyed the rocks outside of where, you know, a potential fourth base could be. And Polt's third command center is much later. So Polt has had a bit more map presence. He's had solid defenses. He's had Vikings just kind of waiting at the top left side of his main base. Polt has been ready for just about anything at the expense of a slightly later third command center. Bomber's had this third command center for a while. This allows him to get his fourth and fifth barracks at a very nice time. And I feel like for this mid-game stage, Bomber's ahead despite not having map control, but because Polt has it, he can be the first to get aggressive. And now he's moving across the map, and he's going to see, oh, you took out those rocks. Pushing you might not be as easy as I thought.
It really feels the tempo of this TVT compared to other like TVTs that I've seen in WCS Europe, for example. There's a lot of respect going on in this in game number one already. Both players realize that it's probably going to be very difficult to break one another at the very beginning. We saw that with the lack of Banshee into Raven. We're seeing that with the, you know, lack of any real big push outs at all or any attempts at damage. But Polt now is the one who's going to try and seize the initiative here.
Yeah, I like this, but, you know, he's starting to chew away at these rocks. Bomber will be able to plant his third command center, and this is where, as I said, that momentum really becomes important. If at any point in this game Bomber takes a big loss, this third base, Polt puts 2 siege tanks under it, can't mine there ever again. If you're behind, you just don't have enough to overwhelm that position without losing your whole army. And it starts to get scary. A couple of these Marines actually end up eating some tank fire. Nothing significant. But Bomber, you know, he gets the third planted faster. That is his advantage in this game, whereas Polt really hasn't been able to do too much. He has an extra tank, a couple extra Vikings, but upgrade-wise, it still looks pretty similar. Polt's stim is later. He has his +1 attack faster, but all in all, Polt has more on the field right now. He's being more active. But Bomber, he's in a better position the longer this game goes on.
Yeah, and I have to say that I think that Polt's comfort zone when it comes to, I would say, all matchups is his ability to be hitting left and right constantly on the aggression, constantly on the harassment. And to your point that you just made now, as long as this goes on, Bomber's going to be in a great spot. Polt being in that uncomfortable spot of just having to sit back and go for a full frontal assault, I don't think he's going to break Bomber anytime soon, and that's going to be difficult.
Yeah, well, Polt already wants to get sieged under that third base. And Bomber was very smart to get a sensor tower. He has 1 tank in position. Actually, going to throw Seeker missiles off this Raven. I think Bomber recognizes that this is a very serious threat. Actually kills the Viking with that Seeker missile. He drops the auto turret as well. This is so dangerous because it's actually almost impossible to squeeze siege tanks between those mineral plots to get behind the mineral patch. So he kind of has to hold on to this left side. And Polt can still siege the mineral line. See, look at that. He has to pull the mules away, he has to pull some of the SCVs. He's only able to utilize about half of this this base, and while he hasn't lost a crazy number of workers, this is still really annoying, and it's a very good reason why Polt is not going to expand to that base on his side of the map.
And for the most part, he was conceding air dominance, so had to throw down a lot of scans when he was going to push that. The Vikings were over on the left-hand side, anticipating some kind of drop play. Those Marines actually could... Ooh, that was very, very close. If he'd have caught those Vikings, you do have to keep that number high.
Yeah, it's starting to get awkward because he says, well, most of your siege tanks are there. I don't need my tanks. I'm going to run about 50 or so Marines around your army.
Wow.
I mean, he could go for the sandwich, or he could just go for the big push, and the big push is what it looks like. He doesn't need to sandwich him because he's managed to hold himself off, and these Marines get caught. More Marines are towards that natural, but this is just so many Marines together. There's no critical massive siege tanks to stop this. He could just focus this command center, pick it off, or go for the SCVs, or he could just fight these Marines. There's not enough here from Polt to stop Bomber's army, and Bomber, he's making it happen.
Wow, this was a really, really ballsy move through to this third base, but really making it work, you're right, and just sits in there, really can't do a whole lot about that. But Polt now, with these Vikings over here, is saying to Bomber, well, you know, I've got my siege tanks. Technically, I would have the air advantage in that position, so you might have to move back a little bit. Bomber's respecting that, does for just a second, but his Marine's still going contested for a second.
One problem is that, as we can see here, the Titanic does not have enough safety boats to get all these Marines out of there, so Polt will be able to clean up some of the forces left behind by Bomber. And now he's going to have there's going to be a reasonable surround for Bomber to take out the tanks that were outside of his base. So both players are going to try to reestablish those third base areas. I still think this third base is more easy for Polt to do a follow-up attack because just the way that his base is laid out, it's very easy. Everything just flows towards that tower, and well, by the tower is Bomber's third.
Yeah. Good route to defend and attack, but now we have 2-2 upgrades against 1-1 in favor of Bomber here, who transfers back to his third base, gets mining once again. Both players have lost a little bit of mining time, so but Bomber obviously with that macro still flourishing. 30 Marines on the way at any time, and actually Polt doesn't have any Marines in production until just then. He missed a bit of a cycle there. He really doesn't want that to happen, especially when he's down in terms of supply. He needs to catch up.
And he had a slight, very slight upgrade advantage. The +2 armor is actually still about a minute away for Polt. So if he gets into a Marine-on-Marine engagement, even 2-2 versus 2-1 is a huge advantage with how fast Marines attack and how little damage they do. So Bomber has a very small window, and while Polt actually starts to push into this, there's a lot more Marines here for Bomber. The medevac count very close between these players. He has that high ground area covered by the tower, but he's mostly just trying to protect the low ground, so he'll kill those tanks of Bomber, but Polt doesn't have any tanks here of his own to siege this base again.
Ever the opportunist, that was a fantastic move in there by Polt to bring that siege tank count down. Now he leads 8-2 in that regard, but does he have enough to fend off this push to the left-hand side here? I think he should do. I mean, as long as his siege tanks are well positioned, there's not really a whole lot that those Marines themselves can do here for Bomber.
Yeah, I think Polt's in a reasonable position to defend himself. And you know what? The thing is, I would have said Polt was behind a little while ago when that third base got pushed back, but I think we all know once Polt's behind, things get a lot better for him for whatever reason. And Bomber loads up for a huge drop, but he is pushed back.
Yeah, Polt saw that with one Marine actually just cycling around near the front and actually moves forwards with these Marines a little bit over-eager there. That's a lot of Marines still that Bomber did drop onto the floor. But look at it. It's dead even in terms of supplies. 183, 181, 91 Marines against 56, but it's the tank numbers that are the big deal. If Bomber was able to get an engagement in a very, very open area with this army composition, it would be great for him. But for now, Polt is keeping these engagements in confined areas where Bomber is having a very, very hard time of actually engaging properly.
Yeah, the simple fact of the matter is this army composition is just so much better for Polt. He really shouldn't try to take these fights with just Marines versus Marines. Bomber almost hitting 100 of them. You have to recognize, with 12 siege tanks, fighting this army head-to-head is pretty easy if the tanks are there to cover him. But, as you said, if he gets caught in the open, if he gets caught with the tanks unsieged, there's just so many more Marines for Bomber that by the time those siege tanks actually siege, Polt will have already lost all of his Marines and basically be dead.
And needs to pull back there for a second. That's too many Marines. As long as he keeps just pulling back to the support of his siege tanks, Polt's going to continue to stabilize on. His upgrades now actually have synced up and are a little bit ahead in terms of that siege tank upgrade for Polt now. So back and forth here in this game, back and forth. Still 14-5 in siege tank count.
Yeah, this is a position where if Polt can actually get another siege up onto that third or the natural or pretty much anywhere, Bomber can't break it. He'd need to go for an incredible spread, but as long as Polt keeps these Marines with the tanks, he should be okay. This is what I was talking about, though. He runs out to the center of the field, and by the time these tanks are sieged, Bomber is already able to push right through this. And he's actually lost a lot of his Marines, but he also trades away a few of the siege tanks the Marine count is still just barely in favor of Bomber, and the tank count still barely in favor of Polt.
Yeah, an open area in the end, what we were talking about before that Bomber did capitalize on. And now Bomber looking to move through the middle here, but the siege tanks on either side of him as the Marines are going to engage, but Marines from the high ground on the left-hand side here as well. A few of these siege tanks on the right-hand side are firing for Polt, but not the ones on the left-hand side. But still, Bomber, it has to retreat out. That was a bit of a ballsy move for him there.
Yeah, Bomber trying to cross through the hot gates without having the high ground vision made things very, very difficult. And now Polt, this is where that siege tank count comes in handy, 11-5. And if he gets sieged up here, there is no way that Bomber can overwhelm him without, I mean, going for some sort of weird base trade. And here he comes. There's not enough siege tanks to stop this force.
I mean, for me, TVT is the best example of trench warfare, but Bomber jumped over the trenches there, was too eager, and lost a lot of his army. Now Polt is trying to move forwards as best he can here after his opponent made that little bit of a mistake. But there's still a little bit of a standoff at this position. Oh, trying to sneak up with those siege tanks, but the Marines on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side even, trying to clean it up.
And this is the big problem. Polt has not necessarily more Marines than Bomber. They're actually dead even. But if Polt moves into that natural expansion area, Bomber can't do anything with his. So what does Bomber say? Okay, we're going to go on a field trip down to your third base and see if we can overwhelm you there. And Polt, he has been macroing back home. He's been continuing to, most importantly, produce siege tanks, so he doesn't need as many Marines as Bomber to defend. And now Bomber, he's in a very awkward position. That natural expansion, there's no mining really going on there, just the gas. And Bomber has about 30, 40 Marines that need to do something outside of Polt's base.
I like how air dominance now has taken the route of a medevac versus a medevac. There's one Viking somewhere on the map for Polt, I think, on the left-hand side, but a nice little move in here by Bomber, trying to bring down the command center. He does get sandwiched, though, has to get right on out of those Marines.
Yeah.
And this left-hand side of this natural here for Polt, just moving forwards to try and kill off Bomber. He's taken a significant supply lead.
Bomber made a very, very bad mistake getting
Wow.
ahead of Polt early on in this game, and because of that, Polt takes it. GG. What a great game, but the biggest thing to point out in that game was that Polt maintained a very nice tank count, and when it came down to those players, as you said, entrenching themselves next to each other, when you have over double your opponent's siege tanks, there is absolutely, you can't just take one of those fights where you're willing to sacrifice a few Marines to siege up your tanks within range of theirs so that you can like try to trade and at the very least get them off of you, maybe not kill the whole army. But Polt, he played about as patiently as you could. Bomber was continuously looking for opportunities to make big drops, and, well, Polt is a very difficult player to kill.
Pivotal moment for me, getting those siege tanks just below the third as they were unsieged. I mean,
yeah.
Trading those away and getting your count so high in comparison to your opponents. Very, very good spot there for Polt. Bomber, a little bit too eager. Needs to reevaluate that position. You said it rightly.
Yeah.
Going into those hot gates, man. There was just enemy on every single side. You can't.
When you walk into a choke like that, numbers don't mean much.
Yeah, a little bit difficult there in the end for Bomber.
And I don't like where he took the third base on that map. He exposed himself very early on. He had an economic advantage, and Polt is, as much as I thought he would have had a larger army based on just how fast Bomber invested into that third command center, he didn't really have that much bigger of a force that Bomber would have needed to worry about it. So there's no other map, I feel, that's going to put us in a situation like that. So this matchup should definitely take a different direction afterwards, but that's I guess that's going to be up to whether or not Polt thinks he can close this out.
I'm looking forward to getting into the second game here. I can't actually quite recall what the second map was. Do you remember?
I think we still have Habitation Station open.
Okay.
It might have been that one and Heavy Rain, I think, for the next two, but I could be wrong. We have the lobby up now. So the map is Heavy Rain.
Heavy
Okay,
Rain,
so, yeah,
okay.
so Heavy Rain is still open. And I think for this map, good Reaper map. If this was one of my ladder games, it'd probably you see a lot of Reaper cheese on the ladder when you play on this map. I'm sure
yeah.
you guys tuning in. It's very good for Reapers. I think that, of course, plays into Polt, but I wouldn't be surprised if Bomber, if they both just ended up Reaper expanding, or if, thinking that neither of these guys would be as brazen to risk such a move, we could still see something like Gas First is still reasonably popular on this map as well.
And I think in the end, Bomber looks at game number one and doesn't really say that his overarching plan, his overarching structure of the game was the bad choice. you know, his Marine tank was still a good choice, but just slight movements were at fault there. So he could still play exactly the same style. We did say if anyone was going to mix it up into mech, it would be Bomber and not so much Polt. And it's not too terrible on this map, I don't think.
The style that Bomber chose is even more so momentum-based, because if Polt's playing the same way as him and he has all those Marines at Bomber's natural, then he can run across the map and kill him. But Polt is willing to play slow, and that's what he needs to do to beat the very aggressive Bomber, as aggressive as Polt likes to be. So can he bring it back on this map? We're loaded in. We are on Heavy Rain, and our first player here in the top position seemed to have a reasonable position in that first game, but could not take it home. The Red Bull sponsored Terran player in the red, it is Bomber. Definitely favors Marines over tanks. And this guy, he understands the power of those mechanical units. The blue Terran player from CM Storm, it is Polt.
Can he take it 2-0? After that first game, he just found the angles necessary. I mean, one thing that was really cool as well over that third base is I mean, technically it was vulnerable anyway, but the speed at which he killed off the sensor tower, like, you bring that down, then you leave your opponent in the dark just a little bit more. Obviously, you're always still going to be situated out there and continuing to put on the pressure from that point, but it does leave Bomber a little bit in the dark. So nice to kill that off nice and fast.
Yeah, it's not really that surprising as a Terran player. If anybody that's, you know, if you've watched a lot of games on that map or played a lot, you know, taking that base is a huge risk, and both players actually open up 13 gas on this map. A little bit interesting. I still think maybe Polt will try to squeeze the Reaper out, but Heavy Rain as a map itself is also pretty good for these siege tank setups, because while in the later stages of the game there's a reasonable amount of drop space to go into the main base or the natural from those outside fours, you still have to keep in mind that there is, it's a very narrow map. There's a lot of choke points, there's a lot of ramps, especially in that middle ground area, where getting funneled into a small position can make those siege tanks so much better.
Yeah, you really don't want to be going through that choke point if the siege tank's on the high ground, that's for sure. But now we have Polt just heading on in here, having a look around, clicks on the gas, gets confirmation of when that gas was thrown down, very similar time to his, so he knows the exact timings of things that are going on. And he even sees a Marine pop out, so everything's good here for Polt.
Yeah, I'm really surprised neither of these players opened Reaper. They can both get fast factories. I guess it could be Banshee versus Banshee. It's just funny that if you want to go Banshee, like, the only reason I can imagine that you would do this build on this map is obviously a gas first build is much more susceptible to any type of fast Reaper attack, or, you know, with a Reaper SCV Marine punch. So you'd want to get your barracks first just to have a few more Marines in case you were attacked, but still be able to go Banshee, because almost on any other map, 99% of the time, I'd almost be willing to even say 100% of the time, you go gas first for Banshee, and both players take a very fast second gas. So it looks like that's what's going to be, both players going Banshee. Maybe one of them go Raven. I mean, you can still go both ways.
You can. Second gas finished up and just getting as much as possible from here on out. I wonder if Bomber actually does commit to just the Raven again, because I kind of come back to that of, you know, you're saying the Banshees. I don't think he will really do too much against Polt. I think both of these players are capable enough of really being able to push that away with not too much problems.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at Polt's history, I think classically throughout all of StarCraft 2, he's loved Banshees. Polt has some of the best Banshee control in the business, and Bomber opening up with a Raven, I feel, was partly because he was scouted. He could still go Banshee. I don't think he's quite like Innovation, where he would prefer to open with Raven most of the time just to be safe against Banshee. But Bomber's also... He might also go Raven just because he got this fast reactor, so he'll have just enough Marines as well defended. It is going to be a Raven from Bomber, so not super surprising, but I expected him to at least go Banshee once in this matchup.
Well, Polt was looking to do that, so it's nice to see that there is a little bit of a deviation up from here, and we'll see how well Polt's going to make this work. With the Raven out, it's certainly a little bit more difficult. So maybe he'll try and find a way in, but even if you're just getting Marine kills, you know, on the very, very edge, the very, very perimeter of where they can actually fire from, it's still not too terrible a trade, bringing down that Marine number early on, and then if you want to follow it up with a push, obviously it can be very strong, but Polt, I don't really see him doing something like that, like a 1-2 with the Banshee and then a follow-up push.
Yeah, and mostly comes down to what type of build your opponent wants to open up with. Both these players are similar in the early game. They're willing to delay just about anything to have Marines, tanks, and Vikings in case they get attacked. And when you look at the playstyle of someone like Neeb that Polt played against, they go for very timing-centric builds where Neeb played with very heavy Hellion opening, and that is susceptible to those fast tank pushes like we saw, but as we also saw, if someone like Neeb can survive, then those timings can do a lot of damage versus heavy Marine builds, but neither of these players are really concerned about that, and because they both open up with tanks and or Banshee Raven, doing a counter push is very difficult since you can almost always expect one of them will have a tank waiting to defend back home.
Yeah, and Bomber's so well set up for this. I actually think he is just going to go for this 2 siege tank push. But the thing is the Polt is sending... It's like he's almost waiting for that 2 siege tank push with the Vikings to come along and then go in with the Banshee, right? Like, he's anticipating what his opponent's going to be doing, whilst Bomber was also anticipating the fact that there was going to be Banshees along. This is... I mean, it's a strong setup here from Bomber. Is he actually going to go?
I don't... See, here's the thing. Polt has actually taken away most of the hit points on the rocks close to his base. He also SCV scouted and knows what Bomber... He basically knows what Bomber's been doing from the beginning of this game. I don't think he can do anything other than harass the Banshees, because since he saw that tech lab on the starport, he knows that if he gets attacked by a Banshee, he needs to have something at home to defend because he didn't build an engineering base. So he doesn't obviously want to leave his base. And as Bomber pushes across the map, the one thing that's really nice for him is this air advantage. But, you know, there's a Polt's advantage. These Banshees are hitting both of Bomber's bases at the same exact time. And this is why I was saying, when you push out like this in the early game, in Terran versus Terran, against an opponent like him, and he's pulling all his SCVs.
It's time. Let's go. Let's go, Bomber.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
You know, he's got a Raven with those Vikings, so theoretically he'll, but this is exactly what I was saying. What kind of player, you're playing against Polt, do you really think he's not going to have siege tanks back home to defend against this? Really?
There you go, GG.
Really? Wow.
I wasn't expecting, like, I was talking about the 2 siege tank push before, and, you know, it being...
Polt's face.
He's like, all right, okay, then I guess I'll take that win.
I would never, ever want to compare someone to me, but I feel like that's just one of those situations where you just panic when you realize, I want to go for an attack, and then 2 Banshees eat your bases. You're like, well, I guess all I can do is pull my SCVs, and then there's tanks waiting, and it's like, well, talk about the fastest game of StarCraft that I think we might have had today, even faster than the proxy gateway earlier.
I mean, there was game number 1, right? There was game number 1 that I mentioned, like, halfway through it. It felt like there was a lot of respect from both of these players.
Yeah.
Like, neither one really wanted to go for it. Bomber goes 1 game down and he's like, all right, then. I guess I'm just going to get aggressive with a standard 2 siege tank push out, but with those 2 Banshees that were just so well situated, Polt was reading Bomber like a book.
Yeah, it's a weakness of not SCV scouting, I feel. The game that brings back to mind, because I had mentioned that Innovation sometimes will open up Raven first. He played a game versus Hart in the Acer Team Story Cup Finals. And Hart opened up Banshee without Cloak, and he didn't attack. And Innovation was like, well, okay, I can just push out. And much like Bomber just pushed out, he waited with the Banshee, and because he didn't hit at the normal time a Banshee shows up, he felt comfortable leaving his base. And because he didn't SCV scout, he didn't know that, yeah, that's probably still going to come, and that allowed 2 Banshees to kill everything. And it's a pretty lackluster ending to that match.
Oh, well. Well defended there by Polt. Congratulations to our double WCS America champion for now moving on to the round of 8. So he looks to defend his title further on in this tournament. And he bags himself a guaranteed $5,000. That's not too bad for a day's worth of StarCraft.
Not at all.
I wish I could have $5,000 for a day's worth of StarCraft, man.
I wish I was good enough to make.
Cast 20 is okay, but it's not as that good.
Yeah.
All right, so guys, we are done here. We'll be back for more awesome games in just a little bit, but now it's over to the analysis desk.
Thank you. Not quite the analysis desk. Instead, we've caught you out a little bit, Claris, because actually we're going to do a bit of an interview with Sir Polt of Terran. Congratulations, Polt. Fantastic victory. Let's talk about the first map first, because it was almost identical build, but you just had a few more siege tanks to win.
Against Bomber? Yeah. I think I was a bit more greedy than him in first build order. So I think I had advantages. So I just thought I need to defend his attack, but he didn't. So it's okay. So played, yeah, as you said, it's almost identical. But I think on the map Yeonsu, it's very important which place you get the third orbital, which place you landed. And he chose the center multi, and I chose the downside at 6 o'clock. And I think it was very important that order. I mean, it was deciding fact, I think,
For you or for him?
for both.
So were you worried when he took that third and it was so close and he was destroying the rocks? Did that make you start to think, oh, hang on, I have to be very defensive?
Because he broke the rock very earlier, so I thought he wanted to play kind of defendable games. He doesn't want to be aggressive, so I just thought, just calm down, and when I think I'm ready, just go out, and it worked out.
Okay, and then the second map. Were you surprised with the second map, with what he did?
Actually, first time I thought he's gonna making a Reaper, and it was not because I saw the Marine, and so maybe Banshee, but it was not either. So I was a little bit confused. But well, I just realized he used to play like that Raven, Viking, Siege Tank, and early aggression. So I used to utilized it, and it worked.
And so when you saw that and then you're starting to get confused, you're thinking, hang on, what's he playing? What do you do at that point? Do you just say, okay, I'm just going to stay here?
It's very important to exactly know what my opponent is doing, but when you don't know exactly what he's playing, then I think the safest way is playing defensive, but sometimes it's better to be aggressive. Then from that attack, you can know what he's doing.
Okay, so you're through now again to the round of 8. What is it about WCS America that's so good for you? You've won 2 seasons in a row, and now another quarterfinal.
In fact, when I won the WCS America season 2 in 2013, I felt really relieved and comfortable at that time. But now I've won 2 times, so I've got the most nervous this time, actually.
Much easier for you. And I know that you like this studio because you played here at Intel Extreme Masters, and you like quiet. You like it to be nice and cool and calm, and that suits your play style.
Yeah, everything is good. I like here very much. The temperature and the calm situation. Yeah.
So does that work well for you then next weekend when we have the round of 8?
Hopefully.
Is there anyone else in the draw that you'd rather not play just yet? Is there anyone playing really well?
You mean the other 6 players? I think Teja dominated his group, and
That's okay because you won't play Tasia in round of 8 right now because he won his group, you win your group.
oh yeah, I'm lucky.
But is there anyone else? Anyone else you think? Is Arthur, for instance? Arthur has been playing really well and is a very dangerous Protoss player and has come through in Group C as well. Would you be okay playing with him right now?
Yeah, I saw that he played very well, but I think Teja is still better than him, so maybe okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much and congratulations. And we will see Polt on Thursday and Friday. We don't know which day yet because he doesn't know who he's going to play. But stick around because we're going to find out at the end of the show tonight. We'll do the quarterfinal draw and find out who Polt will play and who Tasia will play, and indeed who all of the players will play who are in the round of 8. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, though, our lower bracket resumes to find out who goes through as the last man into the round of 8 of WCS America Season 1.